You're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. It's your one-stop shop for all things outdoor, child, young person and education related. Thanks for tuning in. Just before we start this episode, I just want to make a quick apology for the slight background noise. We were sat by the canal in Exeter near the train line, and it was quite a windy day, and although we'd used a muffler at certain points during this episode, there is a little bit of extra wind noise, so we do apologise for that, but hopefully you'll still really enjoy this episode with Anna Harrison from the National Trust. Today I'm delighted to be on tour at Double Locks pub in Exeter on the I have to start again. It's because I've written down Killerton House and I was like, that's not where we are. Let's start again. Today I'm delighted to be on tour. I'm in Exeter on the banks of the River Exe, and I'm here with Anna Harrison, who is the Nature Engagement Officer for the National Trust at Killerton. With a background in ecology and conservation at the Field Studies Council, Planet and People and Bloom and Doom, Anna is passionate about looking after the natural world around us and empowering the people that she works with to do the same. She's here to talk to us about outdoor learning within the National Trust. So thanks for joining us today, Anna.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here. Lovely day for it.
It's a gorgeous day. I'm so glad that we're outside doing it and not inside. I think the best place to start is about your journey that's led you to your current role at the National Trust. So kind of what's your background?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I've got a background in ecology. So I studied biology and marine biology, joint honours at the University of Southampton. Up until not so far away now. I was kind of in the midst of COVID, graduating from that. But throughout my degree, I was dabbling in science comms, ecotourism. So I've always been on the side of engagement rather than research. And then it was kind of natural for me to go into teaching after graduating. So I actually moved to Devon to do agricultural research. Originally just because it was an outdoors job and I was quite passionate about doing something that I enjoyed day to day. So I did a bit of agricultural research and then moved into outdoors education with the Field Studies Council. So I was there for a while, just supporting young people with curriculum-led education.
Nice.
Really enjoyed it, and naturally moved to National Trust a little bit closer to home for me, but also a little bit more open to explore different means of engagement outside of the curriculum. And I was always really passionate about doing that at Field Studies Council as well. So it's much more varied here, a little bit more creative in terms of the diversity of groups that we engage with, young people, older people.
So at the Field Studies Council, was it mostly one kind of type of group that you're engaging with?
Well, yeah, it's young people primarily, not necessarily just curriculum. So I was doing a lot of development of youth courses there, so summer camps, and marine science camp was my favourite, obviously, having done marine biology previously. I was super passionate about getting young people involved in non-curriculum sides of education. But yeah, it's quite a distance from Exeter.
Where were you based?
I was at Slapton Sands.
Okay, that's a long way to drive.
Beautiful place, and worth the drive. But yeah, National Trust Killerton is just on the doorstep of Exeter, so it's a lot easier for me, but also connecting with the city and people who live here is quite nice and rewarding as well. So not so recent move, but about coming up to 2 years ago.
So how long has it been? 2 years in National Trust? And so what does your role as the Nature Engagement Officer kind of entail? What does it involve?
So it's quite exciting. It's the National Trust Killerton estate is a large lowland estate. It's about 6,500 acres in size, which is roughly the same size as Exeter City, if we can imagine Exeter but green, or greener. So my role is about engaging the communities that sit in the estate, but also on the outskirts of the estate, places like Exeter, Bradninch, Cranbrook, a lot of these growing populations with nature and nature recovery projects that we have going on in the countryside. So we do have the house and gardens and all the programming and brilliant stuff that comes out of that, but I represent the wider estates that are outside what we call the paywall, with the local community. So
the paywall is in terms of the gated kind of Killerton estate, as it were.
It's where all the brown signs point to.
Yes.
So that's a house and gardens, and then it's 5% of the wider estate. So it's a very small part of Killerton, but it's what most people associate with Killerton. So we were quite fortunate a couple of years ago to receive some funding internally called Nature Accelerators. So we were identified as one of 17 properties to have real potential for nature gains at quite a quick rapid scale. So we invested that funding in my role, the nature engagement role, but also an additional ecologist role and some additional ranger roles. So we had more capacity to create a bit more of a voice for the countryside, alongside the house and gardens, which is kind of the hub of the estate, I guess.
Nice. But most of your work is outside of that house and gardens.
99% of it.
Okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, is there a typical day for you, or not really?
No, that's what makes it so good. No, not really. I sit in the countryside team, so I base myself at the ranger yard. So I work quite closely with the team of rangers that we have, who look after about 1/3 of the estate. The other 2/3 is tenanted farmland.
Okay.
So a fairly small team for the amount of space that the rangers manage, but because I sit in that team, I've got a lot of good relationships with the rangers that work on the estate and the good work that they do, so I try and embed myself in that as much as possible. So not one set day schedule, but usually associates with doing something with the rangers or learning more about a community group, going out into the community, welcoming people onto our estate. And we've just come out of tree planting season, so up until about a couple of weeks ago it was a tree planting every day.
Been madly tree planting.
But we're out of that
and
now.
were you getting other people involved in the tree planting?
This winter especially. So we were really fortunate last year to receive a pot of money from Plymouth and South Devon Community Forest.
Okay.
So not too local to us, but just down the road. And with that we were able to establish or at least plant at this stage 70,000 trees.
Wow, that's loads.
It's a lot of trees. You can't really wrap your head around that number, but it covered about 93 hectares of land across 3 different sites. So we were working with our tenants. A lot of that space is occupied by tenant farmers, as well as the local community. So about 10% of those trees, about 7,000, were planted by local community groups, and that varies really from schools. Over half of them were young people in schools, but Age UK, local social cafes.
Oh, that's cool.
A really varied bunch, which is what's so great about the space. And then hopefully they'll revisit that space. All of the forest that we've been planting is going to be open access, so they'll be able to come back. And
does it have a name, that forest?
So there's 3 of them.
Okay.
So we kind of refer to them as their current names, which is Column John is an area of farmland that's got the Highland cattle in, if anyone's familiar with Killerton and the Highland cattle. So that will always be Column John. Extension of Column John Woods. But no, that we've kind of toyed with the idea of allowing the young people who have planted the woods to name
a wood.
it.
That'd be so cool.
So if that cottons on, we are working with the young people still that planted it to continue that engagement. We know that a one-off tree planting day isn't necessarily enough to embed that connection to the space. So we have this ranger in the team currently who's dedicated to community forest engagement.
Amazing.
So he's in a really strong position to work with those young people, and he's gone out and done these wonderful co-design workshops, creating badges, which hopefully will incorporate into the woods and benches and signs and all of that.
Oh, that's so cool.
There's lots more to be done to establish that connection, and lot more engagement we can do with those new woodlands. But just planting the trees just to start, really. But hopefully it's a space that people can feel like they've already contributed to.
So they can connect
keep
a bit
going
more.
Back to.
That's amazing. I think that from what I know, within the National Trust, your role is quite a unique one. Why is that? And are you hoping that what you're doing is going to inspire kind of other estates to establish similar positions?
Absolutely. It's a unique position, mainly because, as I said, the setup that we have at Killerton is quite unique in itself. We've got this massive plot of land. And normally within the National Trust we have countryside portfolios, so areas of land like in South Devon you've kind of got sections of land that are owned by the National Trust, and we have teams that are dedicated to supporting volunteering and supporting community engagement within that space. However, at Killerton, because we've got the house and gardens, it almost required an additional position for me within the countryside. So it is unique in the sense that there's no other nature engagement officer by role profile or role whole title that sits in the countryside team. But there are lots of different people doing variations of the role, and no property is the same. So hopefully it is the start of other positions like this becoming available elsewhere in the National Trust. It'd be really lovely to see every countryside team either having engagement embedded in the ranger role profile or as a separate role entirely, depending on the audience. But particularly at Killerton, it's a very good place to start that journey. We're very unique in that we're so close to these growing communities and these places on our doorstep. So to have a lot of work and a lot of projects put into the countryside, we've done some really brilliant things since 2021 in particular, is when we had a lot of funding kickstart a lot of the nature recovery projects. But we've got all this investment in the countryside and nature recovery, and with these growing communities, it feels like the perfect place to have this this role, fitted in. But equally, we've just launched a new strategy. This is National Trust wide strategy, with 3 objectives. The first one being to end unequal access to nature, beauty and heritage amongst everyone, to save and restore nature, not just on National Trust land but everywhere, and to inspire millions others to protect and look after nature, but also beauty and heritage. So it feels like we're kind of, this role's been in post for about 2 years, but the new strategy and the conversation and the buzz around nature connection, young people engaging with nature, is really current and exciting at the moment in National Trust. So I completely see more positions becoming available elsewhere, or similar setups with countryside teams. But there's some really lovely case studies as well are happening across the UK, but also just down the road in Plymouth there's some lovely stories of nature engagement happening in the community, led by the council as well as by the National Trust down there. So unique in the subtitle, but kind of sections of other people as well all joined together to make this one.
I mean, so a completely unrelated question really. In terms of the National Trust, like, how much interaction is there between different properties and estates and stuff, like in terms of like sharing best practice or things that have worked, like how does that kind of work?
So within we are quite good for it. So we do have obviously all the means on technology to connect with each other. It does seem that properties which are close together tend to be like any neighbours, most connected. But we obviously have departments as well within the National Trust, so the countryside teams are quite well connected, and then what we call V&C, which is volunteering and community teams, are quite well connected. So if you sit within those teams, you have a network of support regionally, so southwest here, but then centrally as well if that's required or that's helpful. So the southwest team is kind of is one, and then there'll be one for London and South East, and kind of dotted around. It is a massive organisation though, so it's hard to know everything. That's what I was thinking, it's so big, right? And we know that there are things happening that would be helpful to be connected to, but it's all word of mouth. It's all putting things out onto the our equivalent, I guess, of Teams is WebEx, so kind of putting things out into the space and seeing what comes back. But everyone's so nice in the National Trust as well. I haven't worked for loads of organisations, but everyone seems really willing to help, and we try not to gatekeep our ideas. So
it sounds like it's quite a collaborative place to work.
It makes sense to me, doesn't it? Same with other organisations in Devon. Actually, I've definitely found that, going to different conferences or going to different talks or spaces where nature engagement's happening, everyone's so excited about other people's or other landowners' projects, and we work quite closely with Devon Wildlife Trust, we work closely with Forestry England and all these other organisations that are doing really brilliant things, and just the same within the National Trust, but everyone's on the same mission, we've got the same desired outcomes, so it makes sense to work together.
Nice. Awesome. So when it comes to outdoor learning, does the National Trust have kind of an approach that they've kind of solidified, and how much of it do they try and encompass? So as I kind of said, the engagement or outdoor learning is embedded in our core values. So
we definitely have a duty to enable as much outdoor learning as possible. Obviously, loving people and places is a real core value of the National Trust, and with the new strategy, it's becoming really clear that we have a role to play in inspiring young people. Depending on the property is how much we're resourced for that, and at its core we have space to offer. I think that's the main thing that I try to use in nature engagement work that we're doing now, is we might not always have the capacity to deliver outdoor learning, and quite often we don't. That's not our skill set. That's not, that's why we work in partnership with so many others. But we exist to protect land, and if we can protect land that people use and love to do their outdoor learning or to access, or whether it's curriculum led or whether it's forest school or just young people accessing nature and learning through doing, we have a duty to care for those places. So at its heart, we have a role to play in outdoor learning. For me, because I have a role dedicated to nature engagement, we're quite well placed to explore how that looks for Killerton, and that, like I said, because we're so well placed with communities, we're able to have conversations with lots of outdoor learning providers and ask what they need and ask how we can be part of that journey. And quite often it is just space. But also we're also in the conversation, I guess, of nature connection and how that looks. And just before COVID, we worked quite closely with Miles Richardson, who's a nature connectedness researcher. And I've actually got it here, which isn't helpful for the podcast, but you can have a look at it. We've got a handbook that was created. And this is called Nature and Me, and it's based on the 5 pathways to nature connection. So National Trust as an organisation obviously supports to produce this kind of research on what helps young people to connect with nature and understanding why outdoor learning is important. And then I guess it's up to the property to interpret that and see what that looks on the ground, which is really variable. But for us it's something that we can do.
What are the 5? Are they in there? What are the 5 pathways?
Yes, I've got them drilled into my brain.
Didn't want to test you without checking that they're written down somewhere.
Yeah, it's a bread and butter. So 5 pathways to nature connection, if you're not familiar, is beauty is the first one, which is great for National Trust because beauty is, again, a reason why we exist, to preserve beauty. Meaning, so seeing meaning in nature. All of these are essentially, they've been identified as ways to form a deeper connection with the natural world. So finding meaning in it. Compassion, that's my favourite one. Being compassionate for the natural world and therefore being compelled to take action for it. So that's something that we try and embed in all of our nature recovery projects, like woodland creation, citizen science, whatever that looks like. Emotions, so how nature evokes different emotions and recognising that. And then senses, so we encourage our visitors to engage their senses in nature whilst they're exploring our places on the estate, and that could just be a small prompt on a board, or it could be a led workshop to engage your senses. What can you see, what can you smell? And for us, that the reason why we do that is because it's based on research, and we can kind of go back to this booklet and this resource and know that if we're doing this for our visitors, we don't have to be following the national curriculum, we don't have to be leading forest schools, but we are supporting that connection to form, and that's a really valuable learning tool for young people to take into their lives. So I do have examples of other properties that have done really brilliant outdoor learning sessions and being really led on that, but equally it can be really light touch, and I think at minimum that's what some properties are managing to do, is just supporting their visitors to use those 5 pathways and connect with nature, so that the other things and the providers and the external organisations can do their thing on our space and know that we're here to support them, really. Amazing. As a landowner.
Nice. I mean, you've just mentioned one of them being compassion, and I'm guessing conservation is kind of linked into that, and I'm guessing conservation is a big part of the work that the National Trust is doing. So how does that come into play with the young people that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. It's core. It's our bread and butter, and it's often what I go back to when we're doing the nature engagement projects with young people, is how are we putting the countryside team's mission in their learning and making that really core, because a lot of a lot of young people don't relate to the simple, this is what species of tree that is, or this is that species of dragonfly. It's more about what they can do to feel like they're part of the picture, or they're contributing towards the restoration of nature. So conservation work is really important in that. We mentioned a bit of the tree planting that we've done already, but young people are so valuable and so rewarding to work with them in doing those conservation efforts. Just for example, with the woodland creation work, it's the most recent thing in my brain at the moment is woodland creation. But there's a primary school in Cranbrook we've been working with, Cranbrook Education Campus, and in November, with a woodland that was just adjacent to their school, they walked. There was about 270 students that walked across 9 days, so one class per day, to the site, and planted collectively 985 trees, which represents one tree per student in the school. It's a through school, it's quite a large school, but that for us produced meaning in what they were doing. It produced compassion because they were looking after their trees, and they've since revisited the site, and they'll be doing all this co-creation and citizen science on the space. But that for me is more valuable than them knowing necessarily one tree from the other, because they're actually doing, and they're supporting us, and we feel like they're there and they're going to look after that space long after we've kind of moved on, or 50, 100 years time when those trees and that woodland's established. So obviously trees are a big way that we're using conservation for young people, but citizen science is another one I've mentioned briefly. Obviously it's a large estate, we've got some really brilliant success stories when it comes to nature responding to what we're doing on the estate. So engaging young people in monitoring that is a really useful tool, and again it helps for them to identify things and know the science behind it, but actually the doing and the compassion and the feeling compelled to do something is much more valuable when it comes to the long run of them being custodians of this estate, which is there for them. There's no paywall around it. It's not a membership space. It's just a green space for them.
What kind of things are they measuring, the citizen science?
So I'm looking at the river right now, and that's it's probably the most engaging tool we have at the moment on the estate. So just for visuals, the estate covers, like I said, 6,500 acres, but we've got 3 rivers running through that estate. So we do work quite closely with West Country Rivers Trust to deliver training sessions for young and older people to get involved with. Riverfly is another one that's really common or popular amongst young people, and it's something that we did a lot with Field Studies Council. So essentially that's going into the river, shallow area of river, doing a kick sample, identifying what's there, and using that as a way of
a little bit like pond dipping, but
exactly, but it's just in a river environment rather than a pond. So we've been doing a little bit of that, working on how we can embed that into management plans as well, so actually use the data if it's being standardised. Quite tricky with young people, but I guess it's
true.
Up with
you're trusting kids to count what they found.
If you verify it, it's okay. It's all okay. You can't argue with a dragonfly. You can see it's there.
I went to the Dartmoor Educators Forum, and the subject was rivers a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking there about that exact danger. They were saying, when you say to the kids, right, this is how we're going to get a sample, and these are all the list of the things that you might find, and they were talking about how every time there'll be one kid that's like, I've found everything on the list, and they're like, I don't think you have.
We do. Presence or absence is normally the way forward with that. If we can verify presence of something, it doesn't matter how many times you've miscounted it, or if it's if someone's picked it up and put it somewhere else, if it's there, which is normally a positive indicator of good health. So rivers is a really nice one. It's also coming up to Big River Watch, so 25th of April to the 1st of May is Big River Watch. So we'll be encouraging young people and anyone to stop and watch a local river and have a look up pollution. That's a very easy thing to get involved with, because it doesn't involve entering the water.
Or any tools or anything.
Exactly.
So what are they looking for on the River Watch?
So on the River Watch, there's a few questions you have to answer about whereabouts you are, the kind of environment. Is it fast flowing, slow flowing? But also what species you've seen, if you identify any wildlife, any plants. So not necessarily the types of plants, but if they're there are plants outside the water, plants floating along the water, underneath, algae, all of that kind of thing. And then any signs of runoff pollution as well. So it tends to be a overall health assessment rather than ecological assessment. So it's a really nice one for young people to do, because it doesn't require, like you said, specific identification.
Or to be really accurate.
Exactly. It's just more what you, and also what you feel when you're next to it. Is it making, can you smell anything? Is it making you feel, concerned, or are you at peace? And those are good indicators as well of river health. So that's a nice one. Rivers is a great thing to engage with, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more of it in the coming years. But butterflies as well. We like butterflies on the estate, and actually one project that we did do last year was around butterflies, but in a way that supported a struggling population. So we haven't seen the pearl-bordered fritillary butterfly in Ashcliffe Forest for a couple of years. Which is quite a poster boy of the estate and of the woodlands. So we were working with a local primary school to grow dog violet flowers, which are the food plant of the fritillary, and plant those into the estate.
That's so cool.
Even though we can't bank on them being able to go to the woods and count these butterflies, we can bank on the fact that they've done something, and they feel like in future years they can come back and take part in citizen science to monitor that. Hopefully that re-establishment of the population. But so some seeds, pardon the puns, sowing some seeds in these young people to be involved in conservation in whatever way that suits them, be it counting, sciencey stuff, or getting involved artistically, or doing whatever works for that young person, not strictly curriculum led.
Amazing. In terms of the kids that you're working with, how do they respond to the nature conservation? Because we've heard a lot about climate anxiety, which is kind of rife in teens and young people. What's your experience of kind of climate anxiety and their reaction to getting involved in the conservation work? Positive, which is a good thing. I think mentioning teenagers is really interesting, because we quite often talk about young children, and it is easy for us to talk about young children, because when you're 6, 7, 8 at primary school, it's quite easy to embed outdoor learning into their kind of day-to-day. With older kids, as I'm sure you know already, it's a little bit trickier, and actually trying to get that in and feel like for young people to feel like they can contribute something, as well as doing all of their studies and progressing and writing their UCAS or whatever they're doing at the time, is a little bit more challenging. So when we do work with a teenage population, we do really cherish that, and we've seen some really positive results come out of it. Again, I'll talk about tree planting, but more recently we were working with Exeter College, and we were really fortunate actually to work with their wellbeing department, which I wasn't aware existed. I think because of the size of the college, it's a brilliant department that supports student wellbeing across the board, so not necessarily just in the sciences or environmental sciences, but we had students from construction come out to the estate to plant trees, and they were also inspired to produce some wildlife boxes for us. So again, that's cool. Going back to that, you don't have to be environmental scientists to be engaged in nature. So they produced some nice wildlife boxes, and then continuing to work with us with the rangers to produce things to support wildlife, which is their outlet, I guess. We were working with film and media students as well, so they came out tree planting, and were really inspired to produce short films for us. And we've more recently been working with the graphic design and illustration students who weren't able to come out tree planting, but they have kind of seen the results of the tree planting that the rest of the college has been doing, and other people in the community, and responded to that with artwork and print design, and we've been working with our illustrator to do that as well, that allows them to do it as part of their schooling, but also do it in a way that's their way of expressing themselves. And the wellbeing department were able to do an impact assessment on that, so of that work, and it came out really positive. It felt to me as if, obviously we asked them the usual question saying, are you inspired to spend more time in nature, and that came out overwhelmingly positive. So a lot of the young people were saying that they feel like they are more motivated and more content in nature because they've had this introduction to it. I'm not saying this is their only introduction to it, but certainly we're seeing that link. And
in addition to that as well, the comments and the qualitative stuff, as well as the films and the lovely print artwork, that sense of feeling like they're part of something bigger, and they can do these small actions that contribute to climate and nature recovery, and also seeing our rangers doing this job for a living. It's not often spoken about, these different career paths that don't involve research in nature recovery and getting your hands dirty and driving tractors and planting trees and doing something physical is a really exciting career, and engaging those young people in that, as well as working with our tenant farmers to engage young people in where their food comes from, or farming sustainably or farming regeneratively, is a really exciting thing to see those young people realise. So I mean, again, as with anything in this world, all of our evaluation, or most of our evaluation, is anecdotal, and photos of young people looking really happy and inspired isn't always enough to kind of convince funding bodies. But anecdotally, it's always been quite positive, and particularly when
that kayaker just made me jump. I thought it was a very big fish.
But I think, especially coming from National Trust, we know that we're not always down with the kids. So it's nice to get that positive response from the teenagers. It's getting teenagers' respect is very
because as you say, it's very easy to work with primary school kids. Like, they're often very enthusiastic about, and probably quite excited just to be outside of school for a day. But with teenagers, it's a whole different ball game.
Definitely. I think especially as they'll tell you how it is as well.
They won't pretend to like it.
Oh no, which I appreciate.
I mean, it does sound like your role is incredibly varied from what you said, but if you had to choose, what would you say is your favourite part of the role?
It's a really good one. I'm not going to talk about trees, because I don't think that is my favourite. I mean, obviously it's so diverse and it's so responsive. I think that's, going back probably to the first question, I think that's my favourite thing about having this role being so unique in the position, and that we don't really know what we're doing, and I think that's quite nice. I haven't got any KPIs behind me saying, well, we need to convert this number of people to membership, or we need to we need to have 20 school kids coming on per week at the estate. There's nothing strict or driven in the sense of head counting, and equally with the membership side of things, we know how valuable it is for supporting the work that we're doing. It's our funding stream, but we also know that creates a barrier for a lot of people, so just having that removed and working solely in the countryside means that it can be really responsive to the needs of the community, and we can go to double locks, or we can go and have meetings in the middle of Exeter, go to the allotments in Exeter and talk to the people that are there and meet people where they are, and we don't ever have that expectation that they'll ever come to our land. That could be where the relationship ends, and that could be all they need. So it's really free to do that, and it's just lovely to know that that's what the National Trust values. And obviously I didn't know the National Trust too well before working here, but I've had a real insight into the values of the organisation, particularly the values of Killerton in piloting this kind of work with specific role profiles. So it's it's a really exciting place to be. That's a very generic answer, that I enjoy doing everything in the role.
I think it's a valid answer.
Changing perceptions maybe of who we are and what we expect of people is quite nice, and just being able to help out and be a voice for nature when people maybe expect us to
be a bit different.
And start charging their cars for parking in different places. That's what most people think I'm here to do.
They're like, hang on, has she got a ticket machine?
I'm a ticketer. No, never.
Oh dear. So 2 years you've been with them, more or less. Are there any well, I'm sure there are plenty, but any highlights or memorable moments that you'd like to share with us from the last few years?
Oh, so many. I mean, there's loads of things that I'm really proud of the team for, really. Obviously, as I said, I work in the countryside team, and for me the biggest the most rewarding moments is when I see the ranger team really engaging with people and with diverse audiences and maybe audiences that you wouldn't have otherwise engaged with. So definitely the Cranbrook example of tree planting was a highlight, because every ranger got involved in that. There wasn't a single ranger in the countryside team that hadn't worked with a school group to help plant those trees. We've also worked with groups. Devon Loves Dogs is a really great example of a group where they support dog owners, but we've connected them with our rangers, and it means that our rangers are now leading guided walks with 20 dogs and their owners and talking about why good dog ownership is important in nature. And it's so varied, but for me, seeing that embedded in what I think a ranger role should look like, very biased, but that feels like that's longevity for me. I guess in the same breath as well, with that note on sustainability and longevity of projects. Last year we hosted what we called the East Devon Green Space Summit, which was essentially just pulling together lots of local green space landowners, green space providers, to Ashcliffe Forest, which is in the middle of the estate, and we just spoke about connecting young people, connecting local people to nature, regardless of ownership. And we had Forestry England there, we had Natural England there, Devon Wildlife Trust, Ridgetrot Park, Pebblebed Heath. There was all these green spaces that we normally think of having these turfs in East Devon, and actually, in the same way that it's a shared responsibility of the whole of the National Trust or the whole of the ranger team or the whole of the property teams to connect people and welcome people, it's also the responsibility of landowners across East Devon to forget about their logo a little bit, forget about who owns what or whose turf is what, and actually just think, who are we serving in the community? Is everyone being represented in nature? If Ashcliffe Forest isn't the most appropriate place for this young community to access, who else can support those groups to access a green space? And that's essentially the goal, and that's the direction of travel. So seeing all those people in one space talking about this shared goal, talking about how we can make it happen and what we have to offer each other, was just really, really special. And again, just reminded me that you have these preconceptions of what other landowners or other organisations are going to think, but it's we're all going in the same direction. I do think that in order to fully connect young people with nature, that's what's needed. We need to kind of take our badge off a little bit and just think, well, we're part of the conversation, we're part of the journey, so whatever it's going to take, we can kind of work together to do that. And hopefully we're chipping away at the public perception or young people's perception of what we want, and pathways into conservation will become a lot smoother because we're not so territorial and we're collaborative. I think that's the direction of travel, but that's it goes back to the National Trust strategy. That's the only way we're going to achieve that kind of work. It's the only way we're going to inspire young people fully. It's the only way we're going to end unequal access to nature is by working together.
With each other rather than against each other.
Exactly. And look at our neighbours and say, well, you've got a lovely green patch over there with toilets and a cafe, and can we come and host something on your space? So if you can come and host something on ours, and just think of ourselves as this tool or this medicine that these young people need, and just support them in any way we can. So no, that was a highlight, seeing all those people, and I've since obviously caught up with them at different outdoors group conferences, for example, and it just reminds you that we are getting there and we're getting somewhere, and we're on the same page.
And I think when you come back to the stats about climate change anxiety in kids, like one of the big things that they said that a lot of these studies have shown is the teenagers saying they just don't trust the adults around them to be doing anything. So I think it's great when you hear these stories about organisations that are working together, because it's really good to be able to say to kids, no, look, these guys are actually doing something. Look at this actual physical thing that they are trying to achieve and do.
Exactly.
It's not just words.
In the same way, if we get a young volunteer who wants to work experience placement to Killerton, and we say, we're actually at max capacity, but down the road at Castle Drogo or down even elsewhere in the country, they have availability. We signpost. It's exactly the same thing when it comes to East Devon. So we quite often, and this has happened, where Forestry England has been hosting a day for local nurses in the community, and you know, that's just something that we weren't equipped to do, but we went along to that, and we had the same conversation, and we can just kind of signpost to each other. So it is it in terms of, maybe nurses wasn't a great example because they're already chosen their career, but for young people in choosing a career and thinking, well, I want to get work experience, or I want to volunteer, you know, I know somebody in the National Trust, or I know that I've got a National Trust place next to me, so I can go to there and inquire, and I might end up with Devon Wildlife Trust, but it's a pathway in whatever works for them. That's probably the greatest gift of that collaboration, is we can support young people in any way that they see fit to access a career in nature conservation, if that's what they want to do. Rather than saying, sorry, we're full, closing the door.
You can't do it, go find something else. Exactly. Amazing. Is there anything else that you were hoping that we might talk about that we haven't covered today?
No, I mean, I always feel conscious of not bigging up the pay to enter space as much as I should. I represent the countryside, but we do, you know, that there's a lot of nature connection embedded in the rest of the property as well. So I haven't spoken about apples. That's a whole other thing. I should talk about apples just as much as I talk about trees when it comes to Killerton, because cider production, juice production, apple orchards.
You have
such
big community
a huge
apple
thing.
events, don't you, in the autumn?
Yeah, it's great, and it's not on my mind yet because it's in October. Is when it really kicks off. But you can still experience the countryside through the usual means with the you know, going through the cafe and doing all of that. And I think for a lot of people that is the only way that they access us, for many reasons, mostly accessibility reasons, but
confidence is often a big thing, isn't it?
It's a gateway really into it, and you can experience a lot through those means. So similar to how I wouldn't expect half of Exeter to come to Ashcliffe Forest and start hiking, you know, there's places on the estate that you might not be ready to explore with a young person or with children, but I'd encourage anyone to kind of take that step in, and don't let membership be a barrier as well. Always start the conversation if that is a barrier. We're very conscious of the fact that it is for a lot of people, and paying to enter anywhere isn't a nice thing, but it is also our funding stream, and it means that we can afford to do these wonderful things in the countryside. I guess that's all I'd emphasise, is that I love the countryside, but Killerton House and Gardens is the reason why the countryside is there as well. So so
do go and give it if
you
can.
We've got to do both.
You can tick that box now for your boss.
Thank you. I do mention the gardens occasionally.
And we'll have to have you back in October to do another whole thing just about apples.
I know. I have a tendency just to think about the most recent thing going on, and trees have just occupied such a huge part of my brain, but 70,000 is a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. Well, Tom, our director, is growing an apple orchard at South Brent, so maybe we'll get the two of you in just to talk about apples for 45 minutes.
I have heard that, I might be misinterpreting the fact here, but you only need 4 fruit trees in order to be an orchard.
Oh really? Oh, I didn't know that.
He might have an orchard on his hands.
He might already have it.
It will increase the
increase the value of
your house.
That's funny. I didn't realise that. I assumed there was more to a designation of orchard than that. But
I think it's helpful if there are more for wildlife. But just need 4 apparently.
Just 4. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Make sure they're native varieties.
Yes.
And
then you're all good. Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming out.
It's a pleasure.
And it's been nice to sit by. We kept saying river, but I've just realised we are next to the canal, aren't we? The river's on that side.
I struggle to tell the difference.
I was just thinking about it earlier. I was like, oh no, this is the canal. But anyway,
it's
been nice to sit next to the body of water. Makes a change from the desk, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so finally, I ask everyone this, 'cause it's a nice way to end. The first question is, how do you relax?
Oh, I mean, this is a great example of relaxing. Just sat outside watching the water.
Yeah.
I'm big into my Sudokus at the moment. I would love to say that it's something really inspiring, but Yeah, I love a little puzzle.
No, I think whatever works for you. On a most recent podcast, someone said that what makes them relax at the moment is cleaning, and I was like,
no, I can't say that. Yeah, no, that's.
But I was like, it's different for everyone. So,
yeah, but I also work outside, so I find my job relaxing.
Yeah.
I can take moments to just be in nature, but I also like being warm.
Yeah.
A cup of tea
under a blanket. Yeah, cozy.
Yeah, a bit of telly as well. I love a bit of telly.
I have to say, there's something about this time of year where we've been having these glorious sunshiny days, but because it's still cold and dark in the evenings, I feel like, we've got the best of both worlds, because we're getting out in the sunshine in the day, and then we can still do the snuggly,
still have the
blankety
warmth
thing in the
evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And what are you reading or listening to right now?
I was supposed to say the outdoor group podcast.
No, you absolutely do not have to.
Reading, I've actually just finished a book that I picked up. I can't tell you what it's called. I can't remember. I picked it up from a bus stop in Bath,
okay.
Which is always the best. The best books are the ones that are free.
Yeah.
And you just find.
Was it like just lying on a seat somewhere?
No, it's like it wasn't somebody's that left. No.
Okay.
It was it was a box.
Okay, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was a proper chick flicky book.
Okay.
Nice and easy.
Nice.
But I do have a few books lined up. Massive Dawn French fan.
Okay. I've got her biography under my bed, which I keep meaning to read.
Yeah, it's quite good. Yeah, but she's got some fiction novels, and again, I think it's just light-hearted.
Yeah.
I don't like anything too deep. Just a bit of,
I'm laughing some with you, because often people give me these really obviously workbooks.
Yeah, no workbooks are that old.
I've got a stack of books at home which are all about kind of access to land or trees or fungi, and I'm so it's not that I'm not interested, but I just want to read the chick flick with the terrible drama that at the beginning who's going to end up with who.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, I do. If people are interested in nature engagement, there's definitely books that I recommend. Actually, speaking of Miles Richardson, which we did a while ago, he's got a book called Reconnection, which is very good, and I have read it, and I would recommend it.
Is it fairly accessible? It's not too heavy?
Oh yeah, no, completely. Yeah, completely. It's essentially goes through the 5 pathways to nature connection and talks about embedding it into engagement in young people.
Yeah.
There's a big focus on young people. We're going back to the normal conversation now, but with Miles Richardson's work in Reconnection, it talks about an adolescent disconnect.
Okay.
Which I think is such a great term, but goes into a lot of detail about
accurate,
14 to 16 age range, where they just see trends of dropping off with interest or engagement with nature. So that drives a lot of the work that we do, but would recommend that book if you're during working hours. A bit of trashy book. Dawn French is my go-to.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And finally, why is being outdoors important to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Why is it important? I think it's just life, isn't it? I think seeing, actually, when I was cycling here today, that's normally the route that I would run when I used to live along the river here, canal. Sorry.
That's right.
And I don't know, it's just brilliant, isn't it? It makes you realise that your problems are less than important, and you see birds having fights and fish swimming, as we just saw came out of the water, and people doing their recreation, and it puts everything into perspective for me. I've always lived in cities and grew up in a city, and obviously live in Exeter now, and I think walking around in a city, even if you're not fully immersed in nature or in trees, you get the same effects. It's the people watching, it's seeing the little glimpses of life that are beyond your own minute issues, and it just brings you back down to earth a little bit. I think you can get caught up in your own head when you're at a desk or in a classroom, and it makes you realise that life goes on, doesn't it? So that's why I get out in nature. I do also get chilblains though, so that's probably the price that I pay.
No gloves today.
No, I'm not a glove wearer, but I'm afraid the price, my circulation gets cut off. So it's a toss up. But no, it's always worth it. So you never regret a walk, do you?
No,
so,
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You have to warm up after.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for your time today. You're a star.
It's a pleasure. It's
really
a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
A big thank you to Anna Harrison from the National Trust for coming to talk to us. I really enjoyed spending some time getting to know her and getting to know the work she does. It was a really interesting conversation, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to it as well. If you did, as always, please do like the podcast, rate it, subscribe to it, share it with your friends, do all the things that means that more people will find us. We'll be back in a fortnight with another episode, but until then, thanks for listening.